The convoy route had been hit 17 times in the past month. Every tactical analysis said it was unsustainable. Every intelligence report confirmed the Taliban had the road locked down with IEDs, ambush positions, and spotters at every choke point. When headquarters needed someone to lead a resupply convoy through that kill zone anyway, because a forward operating base was down to 3 days of food and ammunition, they picked First Lieutenant Cade Winters. She was 27, had been in country for 5 months, and she knew exactly what the assignment meant. They were sending someone they could afford to lose. First Lieutenant Cade Winters stood in the motor pool at Camp Leatherneck, inspecting the 5 vehicles that would make up her convoy. She was 27, tall and rangy, with sun-damaged skin and knuckles that were perpetually scraped from working on equipment. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, and there was grease on her hands from checking the lead truck's suspension herself. She'd been in Afghanistan for 5 months, assigned to the 1st Marine Logistics Group as a convoy commander. Her job was moving supplies from main bases to forward operating bases scattered across Helmand province. Food, ammunition, water, fuel, everything that kept Marines alive in places where nothing grew and nothing lasted. The motor pool was hot and loud with the sound of diesel engines and Marines shouting over the noise. Cade moved from vehicle to vehicle, checking tire pressure, inspecting armor plating, making sure every gun mount was secure. She didn't trust anyone else to do it. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about soldiers who faced impossible odds and came out the other side. These are the ones that don't get told enough. Cade grew up in rural Nebraska, the youngest of 4 kids in a family that ran a trucking company. Her father hauled freight across the Midwest, sometimes gone for weeks at a time. Her mother managed the business side, schedules, contracts, maintenance logs. Cade learned to drive a semi when she was 15, illegal but necessary when her father was short on drivers. She understood logistics before she knew the word. She knew that timing mattered, that a truck breaking down in the wrong place could cost a contract, that the difference between profit and bankruptcy was often just planning ahead and maintaining your equipment. Her father taught her that you don't hope your truck makes it. You make sure it does. She joined the Marines at 21 because college wasn't in the budget, and she wanted to do something that mattered. She went logistics, not infantry, because she knew her skills. She was good at moving things from point A to point B, at keeping vehicles running, at planning routes that avoided problems. Officer candidate school was hard, but she made it through. The Marine Corps taught her tactics, leadership, and how to operate in environments where people were actively trying to kill you. Her first deployment was Kuwait, running supply lines in safe territory. This deployment was different. Helmand province wasn't safe. The roads weren't safe. Every convoy was a calculated risk. The briefing was short and grim. Forward operating base Jackson was down to critical supplies. They needed food, water, and ammunition within 72 hours, or they'd have to abandon the position. The only route was Highway 1 through the Sangin Valley, a 47-kilometer stretch that had become one of the deadliest roads in Afghanistan. The operations officer laid out the threat assessment. 17 IED strikes in the past 30 days. 5 convoys had been hit. 12 Marines killed, 23 wounded. The Taliban owned that road. They knew the coalition had to use it, and they'd turned it into a killing ground. Major Hollis, the logistics officer, looked at the room full of convoy commanders. He asked for a volunteer. Nobody spoke. These were experienced Marines who'd run dozens of convoys. They knew what he was asking. This wasn't a normal mission. This was a statistical probability of casualties. Cade raised her hand. Not because she was brave or naive, because she looked at the alternatives and they were worse. If Fob Jackson fell, the Marines there would have to evacuate under fire. More people would die. Someone had to take the risk. She was qualified and she was willing. Major Hollis looked relieved and concerned at the same time. He asked if she understood the threat level. She said yes, sir. He asked if she had a plan to mitigate it. She said she'd need 4 hours to work it out. After the briefing, Gunnery Sergeant Torres, the senior enlisted convoy commander, pulled her aside. He was 34 on his 4th deployment, with grey in his beard and a scar across his forearm from an IED blast 2 years prior. He asked her why she'd volunteered. She said because somebody had to. He shook his head and told her that wasn't a good enough reason to die. She said she didn't plan on dying. Cade spent the next 4 hours in the intelligence section, studying every report on Highway 1 from the past 60 days. She mapped every IED strike, every ambush, every observation of Taliban activity. She looked for patterns. Most commanders ran convoys during the day for visibility and air support. The Taliban knew this, so they set up during the day and attacked when convoys were most predictable. The few convoys that ran at night moved slower, used night vision, and were easier to track because of their headlights. Cade saw something different. The Taliban had a routine. They planted IEDs at night and triggered them during the day. Their spotters set up in specific locations at dawn. By late afternoon they were gone, back to compounds where coalition forces couldn't touch them without starting a larger fight. There was a gap, a window between 0400 and 0530, when the Taliban weren't in position yet. Too early for their spotters, too late for their IED teams who worked in darkness. It was a 90-minute window to cover 47 kilometers. That meant moving fast, no stops, and accepting that if something went wrong there'd be no margin for error. She knew her trucks. She knew what they could do if pushed. She knew her drivers. She called them in one at a time and asked if they trusted her. All of them said yes, though she could see the fear in their eyes. They knew what the mission was. They rolled out at 0345, 5 vehicles in tight formation. Cade led in the first truck, Torres in the rear as tail-end security. No lights, night vision only. They moved fast, pushing the trucks to speeds that felt reckless on roads that were cratered and uneven. The first 10 kilometers were quiet. Too quiet. Cade watched the terrain through her night vision, looking for the signs Torres had taught her. Disturbed dirt, wire trailing from the roadside. Vehicles that didn't belong, nothing. They kept moving. At kilometer 15, the sun started to rise. Cade could see the mountains now, the compounds scattered along the highway, the places where spotters would be setting up. They were in the window, but barely. They needed to move faster. She pushed the convoy to 70 kilometers per hour, dangerous speed for vehicles carrying that much weight. The trucks shook. Equipment rattled, but they gained time. At kilometer 23, they passed the location where the last convoy had been hit. The blast crater was still visible, a dark scar in the road. Cade felt her chest tighten, but kept her eyes forward. Not today. At kilometer 31, Torres called over the radio. He'd spotted movement in a compound to the east, someone on a rooftop with what looked like a radio. Possible spotter. They were running out of time. The Taliban was waking up. Cade made the call. No stops, no engagement unless fired upon. They'd outrun it. She pushed the convoy faster. 80 kilometers per hour now. The trucks struggling but holding together. Her driver looked at her like she was insane. She told him to keep going. At kilometer 41, they hit the most dangerous section, a narrow pass between 2 ridgelines where 5 of the previous 17 IED strikes had occurred. The Taliban called it the graveyard. Convoys slowed down here because the road was bad and the exposure was total. Cade didn't slow down. She told her driver to accelerate. They hit the pass at 85 kilometers per hour, the truck bouncing over ruts, the suspension screaming. The other vehicles followed, trusting her, committed now. Halfway through the pass, Cade saw it. Fresh dirt on the road shoulder, exactly where an IED would be placed. Her driver saw it too and swerved instinctively. The truck lurched, 2 wheels lifting off the ground for a moment before slamming back down. They were past it. The other vehicles followed her line, avoiding the same spot. No explosion. They'd beaten the timing. The IED was there, but it wasn't armed yet, or the triggerman wasn't in position, or they'd moved too fast for anyone to react. It didn't matter why. They were through. The last 6 kilometers were open highway. Cade finally allowed herself to breathe. They reached Fob Jackson at 0518, 93 minutes after leaving Camp Leatherneck. The Marines at the gate looked shocked. They'd been listening to the radio traffic, heard the speed Cade was maintaining, and assumed the convoy was fleeing an attack. Cade climbed out of her truck. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were cramped from gripping the door handle. But every vehicle had made it. Every Marine was alive. They started unloading supplies immediately. The base commander, a captain who looked like he hadn't slept in days, walked up and asked how she'd done it. She told him they'd moved faster than the enemy expected. The story spread through the battalion within hours. The convoy that ran the graveyard at 85 kilometers per hour and made it through without a scratch. Some Marines said it was luck. Others said it was reckless. Gunnery Sergeant Torres said it was the smartest tactical decision he'd seen in 4 deployments. Major Hollis called Cade into his office 2 days later. He said intelligence had confirmed her assessment. They'd found the IED she'd avoided, still unfinished. The Taliban spotters had reported seeing the convoy, but couldn't get into position fast enough to coordinate an attack. Cade's window had been real, and she'd exploited it perfectly. He told her she'd be running convoy operations for the rest of the deployment, not because it was a punishment, but because she'd proven she could read the enemy, adapt tactics, and bring people home. Other convoy commanders started asking her for advice. She shared everything. The timing analysis, the speed calculations, the risk assessment. 3 more convoys used her method over the next 2 months. All successful. The Taliban adapted eventually, but by then the Marines had rotated out, and the road had shifted to Afghan forces. Cade's father called when she got back stateside. She told him about the mission, about pushing the trucks past safe limits to beat the clock. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that's exactly what good drivers do. They know their vehicle, they know the road, and they don't let fear make their decisions. She'd done him proud.